The Draconis Empire stretched across 50 star systems like a crown of jewels scattered across the cosmic void. At its heart sat the Crystal Palace, a magnificent structure built entirely from living starstone that pulsed with soft blue light. The palace floated above the planet Celestria, anchored by ancient gravity wells that had held it in place for 12,000 years. Inside this wonder of the universe lived the Dragon Lords who had ruled with fire and wisdom since before humans had learned to walk upright. Emperor Draken Silverwing sat upon his throne carved from a single piece of meteor crystal. His scales shimmered like polished platinum in the eternal twilight of the throne room. He was ancient beyond measure, having witnessed the birth and death of entire civilizations. His wings could block out suns, and his roar could shatter mountains. Yet today, this mighty being who had never known fear felt his heart breaking with helplessness. His daughter was dying. Princess Seraphina had been the brightest star in the empire. At only 200 years old, she was still young by dragon standards, full of life and promise. Her scales were the color of sunrise, shifting from deep crimson to brilliant gold depending on the light. She had inherited her father's strength and her mother's grace. The people adored her. She would fly through the lower cities, breathing gentle warmth to help farmers with their crops. She studied ancient texts and modern science with equal passion. She was everything a future empress should be. Then, 3 moon cycles ago, everything changed. It began with exhaustion. Seraphina returned from her morning flight and collapsed in the garden. The royal physicians assured everyone it was nothing serious. Perhaps she had overexerted herself. Perhaps the solar winds had been too strong. They gave her tonics and told her to rest. But rest brought no relief. The exhaustion became weakness. The weakness became agony. Her beautiful scales began to dim and crack like dried earth. Her inner fire, which should have burned bright for centuries more, flickered like a dying candle. Her wings drooped, unable to hold her weight. Soon, she could not leave her bed at all. Emperor Draken summoned every healer in the known galaxy. They came in ships that filled the sky like a second fleet of stars. Master Physician Torvin arrived first, a dragon elder who had cured the Crimson Plague that nearly destroyed the northern territories. He spent 7 days examining the princess with devices that could read the energy in every cell. He found nothing wrong. "Her body is perfect, Your Majesty," Torvin said, confusion clouding his ancient eyes. "Every organ functions as it should. Her blood is pure. Her bones are strong. I cannot explain this illness." Next came healer Yashira from the Moonstone colonies, renowned for her ability to sense spiritual ailments. She performed rituals passed down for 10,000 generations. She burned sacred herbs and chanted in languages older than starlight. The air around the princess's bed glowed with mystic energy. Yet when the ceremony ended, Seraphina remained unchanged. "There is no curse upon her that I can detect," Yashira whispered, tears streaming down her crystalline face. "No dark magic touches her spirit. This is beyond my understanding." More came. Scientists with technology that could manipulate matter at the quantum level. Mystics who could see across dimensions. Biological engineers who had created new forms of life. Each one tried. Each one failed. The princess continued to fade, and no one could say why. Word spread through the empire like wildfire. Markets fell silent. Festivals were cancelled. Even the conquered worlds that had once resented dragon rule now sent prayers for the young princess's recovery. In the palace, servants moved like ghosts through halls that had once echoed with laughter. Cade wiped sweat from his forehead as he scrubbed another enormous pot in the palace kitchens. The metal was scorched black from cooking meat for the dragon guards, and his arms ached from the effort. He had been working since before sunrise, and the 3 suns of Celestria had long since crossed the sky toward evening. He was 24 years old, thin and unremarkable in every way. His brown hair hung in his eyes, and his clothes were stained with grease and flour. He came from Earth, that small blue world on the frontier of the Empire where humans had only recently learned to travel between stars. His family had been fishermen for generations, living in a small village by the sea. When recruiters came offering jobs in the Dragon Empire, Cade had volunteered immediately. The pay was enough to support his mother and 3 younger siblings back home. Life in the Crystal Palace was not what he had imagined. He had dreamed of seeing wonders, of learning from the great dragon civilization. Instead, he spent his days in steaming kitchens, scrubbing pots, chopping vegetables, and carrying supplies from the storage levels. Dragons did not notice humans unless they made mistakes. To them, humans were simply tools that moved and occasionally needed feeding. Cade had learned to be invisible. He kept his head down. He worked hard. He never complained. Other human servants thought he was boring. They gathered in the dormitories at night to drink and gamble and share stories from home. Cade rarely joined them. He preferred to observe. Because Cade noticed things. He noticed that the head cook ordered fresh night bloom flowers every 3 days, always at sunset, even though no one in the palace ate them. He noticed that Lady Morgana, the Emperor's cousin, visited the princess every evening, but her smile never reached her cold green eyes. He noticed that the princess's screams, which echoed through the ventilation shafts, always came at the same hour of the night. Most importantly, he noticed that everyone was looking in the wrong direction. The physicians examined the princess's body with their machines. The mystics searched for curses and dark magic. The scientists analyzed her blood and tissue. But Cade, who spent his nights lying awake in his narrow bed, listening to the palace breathe around him, thought perhaps the answer was simpler and more terrible than anyone suspected. Whispers in the dark. Late one evening, Cade was carrying a tray of dirty dishes through the service corridors when he heard voices. He pressed himself against the wall, staying in the shadows. 2 dragon guards stood at the intersection ahead, speaking in low tones. "My sister works in the royal wing," one said. His voice was deep and rumbling like distant thunder. "She says the princess barely sleeps anymore. Every night, same time, she wakes up screaming." "Nightmares?" the other asked. "That is what they tell the Emperor. But my sister says it is more than nightmares. She says the princess speaks of shadows that crawl and whispers that burn. She claws at her own scales as if trying to tear something off her skin. The physicians say her mind is breaking from the pain. Perhaps. Or perhaps the pain comes from somewhere the physicians cannot see." The guards moved on, leaving Cade alone in the dark corridor. His heart pounded. The princess spoke of shadows and whispers. That sounded less like illness and more like something else entirely. Something that was being done to her. But by whom? And why? And most importantly, how could a kitchen servant possibly prove what the greatest minds in the Empire could not see? Cade knew he should forget what he had heard. He should go back to his pots and his simple life. Getting involved in the affairs of dragon royalty was a sure way to end up dead. Humans who spoke out of turn often disappeared. The dragons were not cruel, but they valued order above all else. Yet as Cade lay in his bed that night, staring at the ceiling of the dormitory, he could not stop thinking about Princess Seraphina. He had seen her once, months ago, flying over the lower levels of the palace. She had been magnificent, her scales catching the light like a living sunset. She had looked down and seen the human workers in the gardens. Instead of ignoring them, she had descended and asked about their lives. She had listened with genuine interest. When old Thomas had mentioned his daughter was sick, the princess had sent her personal physician to help. She was kind. She was good. And she was dying while everyone looked in the wrong places. Cade made a decision that would change everything. He would watch. He would listen. And if he found the truth, he would speak it, no matter the cost. Cade began his secret investigation the next evening. He volunteered for every task that would take him near the royal wing. He offered to carry supplies, deliver meals, and clean floors that did not need cleaning. The head cook, a grumpy dragon named Fenric, was pleased to have such a dedicated worker and asked no questions. The royal wing was a place of breathtaking beauty. The walls were made of translucent crystal that glowed with inner light. Tapestries woven from star silk hung from the ceilings, depicting the history of the Dragon Empire. The floors were smooth as glass, polished by centuries of careful maintenance. Guards in silver armor stood at every corner, their eyes constantly scanning for threats. Cade moved through this splendor like a shadow. He had learned the rhythms of the palace. He knew when the guard shifts changed. He knew which corridors were busiest and which were forgotten. Most importantly, he knew how to be so unremarkable that eyes slid past him without registering his presence. On his third night of observation, Cade discovered something interesting. He was mopping a hallway near the princess's chambers when Lady Morgana walked past. She moved with the grace of her dragon bloodline, her emerald scales catching the light. She wore robes of deep purple, and her silver hair was braided with jewels. Everything about her spoke of nobility and refinement, but Cade noticed her hands. They trembled slightly, and her claws kept flexing as if she wanted to grab something. Her eyes darted to the guards, then to the princess's door, then away. It was the behavior of someone nervous, someone hiding something. Morgana entered the princess's chambers. Through the open door, Cade glimpsed Seraphina lying motionless in her enormous bed. The princess's scales had faded to a sickly gray color. Her breathing was shallow and labored. Emperor Draken sat beside her, holding her hand, his mighty head bowed in grief. Morgana approached with a bouquet of white lilies. "Dear uncle," she said, her voice dripping with concern. "I brought flowers from the garden. They say the scent can bring peaceful dreams." The emperor looked up, his eyes red from weeping. "Thank you, Morgana. You have been a constant comfort in these dark times." "Family must support each other," Morgana replied. She placed the flowers on the bedside table, then bent to kiss her cousin's burning forehead. "Sleep well, sweet Seraphina. May the stars watch over you." Cade watched all this while pretending to focus on his mop. To anyone watching, Morgana appeared to be the perfect devoted cousin. But Cade saw something else. When Morgana thought no one was looking, her expression changed for just a heartbeat. Her lips curved into the smallest smile. Her eyes gleamed with something that looked almost like satisfaction. Then the mask was back in place, and she swept from the room in a rustle of silk. Cade's blood ran cold. He had seen that expression before, back on Earth. There had been a merchant in his village who always smiled and offered generous prices. Everyone trusted him. Then one day, the merchant's competitor's shop had burned down. Cade had been walking past at dawn and seen the merchant watching the ruins. For just a moment, before he noticed Cade, the merchant had smiled that same smile of secret pleasure. The competitor's family had lost everything. The merchant had bought their land for cheap. It had taken years before people realized the truth, the hidden passage. Cade knew he needed proof. Suspicion was not enough, especially when it involved accusing a dragon noble. He needed to catch Morgana doing something wrong, something undeniable. For the next week, he followed her movements as closely as he dared. Morgana kept a precise schedule. She attended court in the mornings. She took tea in the garden at midday. She visited the princess every evening at sunset. Then she retired to her chambers in the eastern tower. Except on certain nights, she did not stay there. Cade first noticed this on the 6th night of his observation. He had positioned himself in a storage alcove near the eastern tower, pretending to organize supplies. He watched Morgana enter her chambers as the palace bells rang midnight. The guards at her door settled into their positions. Everything appeared normal, but an hour later, Cade noticed something strange. A faint draft came from a wall that should have been solid stone. He waited until the guards were looking away, then crept closer. Running his hands along the crystal wall, he found what he was looking for, a seam, barely visible, marking the outline of a hidden door. His heart raced. Secret passages were common in old palaces, used by servants and guards to move unseen. But why would Lady Morgana need to use one? Cade pressed his ear against the wall. He heard nothing. The passage must be soundproofed. He searched for a way to open it but found none. The mechanism was probably inside Morgana's chambers, operated by a hidden switch. Frustrated, Cade returned to his alcove. He would have to find another way to follow her. The answer came 2 nights later. While cleaning the lower archives, a dusty storage room filled with old records, Cade discovered ancient blueprints of the palace. The documents were thousands of years old, written in the angular script of the first dragon emperors. Cade could not read the language, but the diagrams were clear enough. The Crystal Palace was honeycomb with secret passages. They connected every major room, allowing servants to move without disturbing the nobility. Over the centuries, most had been sealed or forgotten. But according to the blueprints, one passage ran from the eastern tower all the way down to the sub-levels beneath the palace. Cade memorized the route. The next night, when Morgana retired to her chambers, he was ready. He waited in the shadows of a forgotten corridor on the 3rd sub-level. The walls here were bare stone, not crystal. The air was cold and damp. Few people came here. It was used mostly for storage of things too old or broken to be useful. At exactly 1 hour past midnight, Cade heard footsteps. He pressed himself into a deep shadow and held his breath. Lady Morgana emerged from a section of wall that looked solid. She wore a dark cloak instead of her fine robes. Her face was uncovered, and in the dim light of the emergency glow strips, Cade saw her true expression. There was no kindness there. No concern. Only cold calculation and hunger. She walked quickly, her claws clicking on the stone floor. Cade followed at a safe distance, using every trick he had learned. He moved on the balls of his feet to silence his steps. He stayed in the darkest shadows. He controlled his breathing to make no sound. Morgana descended deeper into the palace, past levels that Cade had never seen. The air grew colder. The walls became rough and ancient. They were in the oldest part of the palace now, the foundations laid when dragons first came to Celestria 12,000 years ago. Finally, Morgana stopped at a heavy door bound with iron. She knocked 3 times, paused, then knocked twice more. The door opened, and warm light spilled out. Cade caught a glimpse of a small room filled with strange objects. Crystals that pulsed with sickly green light. Books bound in leather that looked too much like skin. And in the center, on a pedestal of black stone, sat a small statue. The statue was carved from dark red crystal and shaped like a sleeping dragon. But something about it was wrong. The proportions were twisted. The angles hurt to look at. Even from a distance, Cade felt a wave of nausea wash over him. Morgana entered the room and the door closed behind her. Cade crept closer, his heart hammering so hard he thought it might burst. He pressed his ear against the door. "The Emperor grows desperate," Morgana's voice said from inside. "He has called upon the Oracle of Depths. If she comes, she might see the truth." Another voice answered, raspy and cold. Cade did not recognize it. "Then we must work faster. How much longer until the princess dies?" "The physicians say she has perhaps 2 more weeks. Her life force drains into the heart stone every night. Soon there will be nothing left. And when she dies, you ascend to the throne." "Yes." Morgana's voice was filled with dark satisfaction. "My uncle will be devastated. He will be weak. The council will turn to me for strength. I will rule the Draconis Empire, and the old ways will return. No more softness. No more mercy for the lesser species. Dragons should rule with fire and fear, as we did in the ancient times." Cade felt ice in his veins. The heart stone. That cursed statue was killing the princess, draining her life force night after night. And Morgana was behind it all. He had to tell someone. He had to warn the Emperor. But who would believe a human servant? He had no proof except what he had overheard. Morgana would simply deny everything, and Cade would be executed for making false accusations against nobility. He needed evidence. He needed that statue. The door began to open. Cade ran, his footsteps echoing in the empty corridor. Behind him, he heard Morgana's sharp intake of breath. Someone was listening, she hissed. Find them, the raspy voice commanded. Cade ran faster than he had ever run in his life. He heard heavy footsteps behind him, gaining ground. Dragons were faster and stronger than humans. He would never outrun them in a straight chase. He ducked into a side passage, then another, using the blueprints he had memorized. The footsteps echoed from multiple directions now. They were searching for him systematically. Cade's lungs burned. His legs ached. But he kept running, twisting through the maze of forgotten corridors. Finally, he emerged in a storage room he recognized. He was back in the familiar territory of the servants' quarters. He stumbled into his dormitory and collapsed on his bed, gasping for breath. The other servants were all asleep. No one had noticed his absence. Cade lay in the darkness, his mind racing. He knew the truth now. But knowing and proving were two different things. Morgana would be on guard now. She knew someone had discovered her secret. She would move the statue or destroy the evidence. Unless Cade acted first. He had one chance. It was dangerous, probably suicidal. But Princess Serafina was dying, and he was the only one who knew why. He thought of her kindness, of how she had treated humans as equals when others saw them as servants. He thought of Emperor Draken's grief, of an empire on the edge of losing its future. Cade made his decision. Tomorrow night, he would steal the heart stone. And then he would do something no human servant had ever dared. He would demand an audience with the Emperor himself. Morning came too quickly. Cade forced himself to work as if nothing had changed. He scrubbed pots, chopped vegetables, and carried supplies with the same unremarkable efficiency as always. Inside, his thoughts churned like a storm. He had until nightfall to prepare. Stealing the heart stone would be dangerous enough, but getting it to the Emperor without being stopped would be nearly impossible. Palace protocol was absolute. Humans did not speak directly to Dragon Lords, especially not the Emperor. Any attempt to approach Draken would result in Cade being arrested by the guards. But Cade had one advantage. In his weeks of observation, he had learned something important about Emperor Draken. Every night, the Emperor left his daughter's bedside for exactly 1 hour. He would walk alone to the palace observatory, where he could look out at the stars and find some small measure of peace. The guards gave him privacy during this time, stationing themselves at the observatory entrance but never following him inside. If Cade could reach the observatory during that hour, he would have a chance to speak with the Emperor alone. It was the only chance he would ever get. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Cade gathered supplies, a length of rope he found in storage, a servant's cloak with a hood to hide his face, and a small cloth bag to carry the heart stone. Each item he tucked away carefully, making sure no one noticed. As the 3 suns began to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, Cade felt fear trying to paralyze him. He was just a human from a fishing village. What right did he have to interfere in the affairs of dragons? He could die tonight. Even if he succeeded in stealing the statue, even if he reached the Emperor, there was no guarantee he would be believed. But then he remembered Princess Serafina's face, pale and fading, and he knew he had to try. Into the depths. Midnight came. The palace settled into its nighttime rhythms. Most servants were asleep. The guards changed shifts. Cade slipped from his bed and dressed in dark clothes. He pulled the hood over his head and made his way to the lower levels using the secret passages he had discovered. His hands shook as he descended into the ancient foundations of the palace. The corridors were empty and cold. Emergency lights cast everything in sickly green shadows. Every sound made him jump, certain he had been discovered. He reached the heavy iron door. His heart sank. There was a lock, complex and magical, with runes that glowed faintly in the darkness. He had no way to open it. His desperate plan was failing before it even began. Then Cade noticed something. The door was not fully closed. Someone had been careless, perhaps in their hurry to pursue him the night before. A gap of perhaps 2 fingers' width remained. Cade wedged his fingers into the gap and pulled. The door was incredibly heavy, but slowly, inch by inch, it opened wide enough for him to squeeze through. The room beyond was exactly as he had glimpsed before. Strange artifacts cluttered shelves along the walls. Books in languages that hurt his eyes to read lay open on tables. And there, on its pedestal of black stone, sat the heart stone. Up close, it was even more disturbing. The twisted dragon shape seemed to writhe in the flickering candlelight. The dark red crystal pulsed like a heartbeat. Cade felt waves of nausea and cold radiating from it. This was evil made physical, a curse given form. He wrapped his hand in cloth and reached for the statue. The moment his fingers touched it, pain shot up his arm like lightning. Images flashed through his mind: darkness, hunger, endless consuming emptiness. He heard screaming, though whether it was the statue or his own voice, he could not tell. Cade gritted his teeth and grabbed the heart stone. He shoved it into his bag and ran. Alarms sounded immediately. Not physical bells, but something worse. A magical screeching that pierced through the palace like a knife. Morgana would know her prize had been stolen. Cade ran through the corridors with the bag clutched to his chest. The heart stone burned cold against his body even through the cloth. Behind him, he heard shouts and the thunder of dragon footsteps. He emerged into the main palace and headed for the observatory. Guards were rushing past, responding to the alarm. In the confusion, no one noticed one more hooded figure moving through the halls. The observatory was in the highest tower of the palace. Cade climbed stairs until his legs burned and his lungs screamed for air. Finally, he burst through a door onto the observation deck. Emperor Draken stood alone, gazing out at the stars through the crystal dome. He turned at the sound of the door, his eyes widening in surprise. "Who dares disturb my solitude?" His voice was like rolling thunder. Cade threw back his hood and fell to his knees. "Your Majesty, forgive me. I am Cade, a servant from the kitchens. I know who is killing Princess Seraphina." The truth revealed. Draken's eyes blazed with sudden fury. "You dare speak to me? Guards! Please!" Cade shouted desperately. "Lady Morgana is using a cursed artifact to drain your daughter's life. I have it here. This is what is killing the princess." He pulled the heart stone from the bag and held it up. Even in the dim starlight, its evil was unmistakable. The statue pulsed with stolen life, and tendrils of dark energy writhed around it like smoke. Emperor Draken's rage transformed into shocked recognition. He had ruled for thousands of years. He knew dark magic when he saw it. "Where did you get this?" His voice was deadly quiet now. "From a hidden room in the lower levels, Your Majesty. Lady Morgana goes there every night. I followed her. I heard her speak of draining the princess's life force. This statue is called a heart stone. Every night it feeds, and every night Princess Seraphina grows weaker." The observatory door burst open. Lady Morgana stood there with 6 guards behind her. Her face was twisted with fury. "That human is a thief and a spy," she declared. "He broke into my private meditation chamber and stole a family heirloom. He must be executed immediately." "Your meditation chamber?" Draken's voice was cold as the void between stars. Explain to me, dear niece, why your family heirloom radiates a death curse. Explain why it pulses with stolen life energy that smells exactly like my daughter's essence. Morgana's expression flickered. For just a moment, Cade saw panic in her eyes. Then her face hardened. I do not know what poison this human has poured in your ear, uncle. That artifact is harmless. He is lying to cause discord in our family. Then you will not mind if I destroy it, Draken said. He reached for the heart stone. No. Morgana lunged forward, her true feelings betraying her. That is mine. You have no right. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. In one smooth motion, he took the heart stone from Cade's hands. The artifact screamed, a sound that shattered the crystal windows of the observatory. Dark energy erupted from it, writhing like living shadows. Draken's inner fire blazed. Flames hotter than the core of a star engulfed the heart stone. The artifact shrieked louder, the sound drilling into Cade's skull. He fell to the floor, hands over his ears. Then, with a sound like breaking glass, the heart stone shattered. The dark energy dispersed in a cloud of ash. The oppressive weight Cade had felt since touching the statue lifted like fog in sunlight. And in the royal chambers far below, Princess Seraphina gasped and opened her eyes. The truth came out quickly after that. Under the Emperor's questioning, Morgana confessed everything. She had purchased the heart stone from a dark mage on the outer rim. She had placed it in the hidden room directly below Seraphina's chambers. Every night, it had drained the princess's life force, slowly killing her while leaving no physical trace that the royal physicians could detect. Morgana had planned to rule the empire with an iron fist, returning to the old ways when dragons conquered without mercy. She had seen her cousin's kindness as weakness and the emperor's love for lesser species as betrayal of their heritage. She was stripped of her titles and banished to a prison world on the edge of the empire. Her co-conspirators met similar fates. Princess Seraphina recovered quickly once the heart stone was destroyed. Within 3 days, her scales regained their brilliant sunset colors. Within a week, she was flying again. Within 2 weeks, she stood before the assembled court, healthy and radiant. And beside her stood Cade. This human servant risked everything to save my life, Seraphina announced to the gathered nobles. He saw what the greatest minds in the empire could not see. He acted when others stood paralyzed by protocol and fear. He is a hero, and he will be honored as such. Emperor Draken stepped forward. Cade of Earth, you have saved my daughter and exposed a traitor. You have shown wisdom beyond your years and courage beyond your station. Name your reward, and if it is within my power, it shall be yours. Cade thought of many things he could ask for. Wealth, titles, power. He could demand lands on Earth for his family, or a position of authority in the Empire. But as he looked at the assembled dragons, at the servants watching from the edges of the Great Hall, he knew what he truly wanted. Your Majesty, I ask for nothing for myself. But I ask that humans be given more opportunities to serve in meaningful ways. We may be weaker and shorter-lived than dragons, but we can still contribute. We see things from different perspectives. Sometimes, that is exactly what is needed. A murmur ran through the court. Some nobles looked offended. Others looked thoughtful. Draken smiled, the first true smile anyone had seen on his face in months. Wisdom indeed. Your request is granted. Furthermore, you are appointed to the position of special advisor to the imperial court. You will serve alongside the princess, offering your unique perspective on matters of state. And so began a new era in the Draconis Empire. Cade remained in the Crystal Palace, no longer a kitchen servant but an honored advisor. He helped bridge the gap between dragons and the other species of the Empire. His success inspired other humans to step forward, to contribute their skills and insights. Princess Seraphina became his closest friend. She often said that Cade had given her more than her life back. He had given her hope that the empire could be better, that strength did not require cruelty, and that wisdom could come from the most unexpected places. Years later, when Cade was an old man with gray in his hair, he would stand in the observatory where he had once confronted the Emperor. He would look out at the stars and remember that terrifying night. And he would smile, knowing that sometimes the smallest person in the room can change everything. Because true courage is not about size or strength. It is about seeing what is right and acting on it, no matter the cost. And that is a power anyone can possess, dragon or human, noble or servant, mighty or humble. The palace of Draconis continued to float above Celestria, a beacon of hope and justice among the stars. And in its halls, humans and dragons worked side by side, building a future brighter than any empire of old. The end of the darkness had become the dawn of hope.